We're all excited about the start of football season, but are you underrating what it means for your dynasty league? Sure, each year and especially each week means less when you're playing the long game, but the start of NFL action makes a big impact on player market values. Some guys surprise, other guys disappoint. The only thing we know for sure, a lot is going to change. Today, we're going to help you get ahead of that market, and some of the moves we're suggesting are going to surprise you. An all new Draft Sharks podcast starts right now.
It's the Draft Sharks.
We have made it to week one of the NFL season, 2 days away from the opener as we record this. I'm Matt Schaff, along with my boys Jared Smola and Shane Hallam of DraftSharks.com. We've spent most of our recent shows talking redraft because we've been in the heat of redraft season, but it's always dynasty season. So we wanted to talk a little dynasty before the games kick off, and that's why, of course, we brought back our prospect guru and resident dynasty commish, Shane Hallam. You probably play in one of his leagues if you're out there and you play in dynasty. He's going full prospect guru mode with his first recommended move here because we've got 6 dynasty moves that we want you to make before the season. We each brought 2 of them to the table. Shane's first one couldn't be more Shane. What you got for the people?
I'm here to tell you to buy 2027 rookie picks. You're not going to get me on a dynasty show for the next 2 years without me talking about this 2027 rookie class that's upcoming. It looks like it might be one of the best rookie classes that we've seen in a while, and especially on the wide receiver front. Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, Ryan Williams from Alabama, Bryant Wesco from Clemson, all look like top half of first-round NFL draft picks, and Jeremiah Smith might be the best wide receiver prospect we've seen in a while. But we're also looking at this quarterback class for 2026 that is looking pretty good. Players like Arch Manning from Texas, Lenore Sellers from South Carolina have been talking about going into the 2027 class, waiting an extra year, developing their skills a little bit. And so that's propping up this class a little bit more. So if you're a rebuilding team, I think you want to look at, instead of some of the sells that we bring up here, if you're like, okay, I want to trade these for rookie picks, don't trade them for 2026 rookie picks. Trade them for 2027 rookie picks. We even saw in week 1 of college football, some of the running backs like Jaden Baugh out of Florida have great games and look like they could be top 50 picks in the NFL draft. So this 2027 class is looking really good for fantasy, even on the IDP front. To wet Matt's whistle a little bit, the defensive prospects, 2 of the best defensive end prospects I've seen in a long time coming out in this class. So no matter what type of league you're in, this 2027 group is good. So if you're rebuilding, you're like, I'm not going to compete this year, I'm not going to compete in 26, then make it a priority to get those 27 picks and trade some veterans that you have on your team for those picks before the college season and NFL season keeps unwinding.
Shane, we're trying to run a family show here, so I'd appreciate if you'd stay away from my whistle. But who do you think is going to be the number 2 rookie pick? I think we're all expecting Jeremiah Smith to be the number 1 pick in 2027 rookie drafts. Who's your early favorite to be that number 2 pick, consensus-wise?
I think it's Ryan Williams, the receiver from Alabama. He really reminds me of CeeDee Lamb in college as a slot receiver who's on the smaller end, but the acceleration, explosion, and then the footwork in terms of his cutting, just the separation Ryan Williams gets play after play after play. They should throw to him every single play. He's that type of player. So to me, Jeremiah Smith looks like Julio Jones. Ryan Williams looks like CeeDee Lamb. I think the very high comparisons, but I think they're apt right now with where those 2 players are at.
Of course, you can find Shane's rankings of those players years ahead of when they actually hit the league on DraftSharks.com right now. So make sure to check out his Devy rankings. And if you don't know how to value those 2027 rookie picks, don't worry, because I don't either. And that's why we have not only Shane, but the Dynasty Trade value charts available. They work across formats. They evaluate players across positions. So you can say this running back is worth this at wide receiver, this at quarterback. Super flex obviously adds another wrinkle. And of course, these rookie picks get even more challenging to value versus existing players. So check the trade value chart. It's a great starting point for building that trade that's going to help your team for years to come. Jared, what's your first move on this show?
Yeah, price check time on Jaylen Waddle, who is wide receiver 28 on the Keep Trade Cut Dynasty rankings, wide receiver 25 on Fantasy Pros consensus Dynasty rankings. And honestly, that price kind of makes sense if you just look at, the season he's coming off of last year. He was wide receiver 49 in total PPR points last year, wide receiver 59 in points per game. And the vibes in Miami just aren't great right now, right? It's a soft team. They're complaining about their joint practices being too physical. Mike McDaniel's on the hot seat. Who knows what's going on with Tyreek Hill? So, like, I get the skepticism about Jaylen Waddle. I think he's a buy right now ahead of what's going to be a big bounce back season for Waddle. A lot of what went wrong in Miami last year was Tua Tagovailoa missing 6 games. The quarterback play was atrocious without him, and that greatly impacted Waddle's numbers. If you just look at Waddle's efficiency last year with Tua, 77% catch rate, 14.2 yards per catch, 11 yards per target, 1.78 yards per route. So he was still good last year with Tua. So that was a lot of the issue. Hopefully we get a better, healthier season from Tua this year. But really with Waddle in Dynasty, I'm just betting on the player and the longer track record. If you kind of ignore what happened last year, this guy was the 6th overall pick of the 2021 NFL draft. Catches 104 balls as a rookie, finishes wide receiver 13 in PPR points in his second season, wide receiver 22 in his third season, and he's 26 years old. If you look at our aging curves that fuel our dynasty rankings, age 26, age 27, that's like peak age for wide receiver. So Waddle right now is just hitting his peak. I think right now is the lowest his dynasty price is going to be for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So I would take a crack before week 1 at, going out and making a trade offer for Jaylen Waddle.
Jared, I think if anything, you're being too fair to the market, which is being stupid with Jaylen Waddle right now. At worst, you're getting a guy who performed as a top 24 fantasy wide receiver in 3 of his 4 seasons to date. So if last season makes you worried about him, then you need to step back and look at what actually happened. The conditions that Jared just talked about, the age that Jaylen Waddle is. Like, do you think that he just got worse last year? I'm going to say probably not, given that he's not very old. So I think it was probably a rough year for him and the entire team. And if you look at the 3 years before that, they're much better. 2 of those 3 seasons that found him inside the top 24, by the way, also came with Tyreek Hill on the team. So it's not like Tyreek Hill just arrived and hurt Jaylen Waddle's numbers. Now, that's the at worst case. At worst, you're getting that guy. At best, you're buying Jaylen Waddle now ahead of the season where he could potentially overtake Tyreek Hill as Miami's top receiver. Tyreek Hill is significantly older, coming off multiple injuries, including the oblique this summer. Entirely possible that he's losing a step at this point. And as a speed receiver, that could be vital. And then if you're worried about Tua, you're just being too short-sighted. If Tua gets another concussion this year or other injuries, because he's been injury prone since college, if he just proves that he can't hold up beyond this season, then Miami's going to find a new answer. So that's a great reason to buy on other people's skepticism of Waddle. And even though his ranking is, higher right now than where he finished last season, I still think the market is too skeptical based on what we've seen from this guy to this point. Shane, I've talked enough about Jaylen Waddle this offseason. I was going to single him out as an option here if Jared didn't pick him before I got a chance to call it. What do you think about Jaylen Waddle on the dynasty market?
I think when we watched that Miami Dolphins offense last season, we saw them kind of revert to, Tyreek Hill has to play this role and Waddle has to play this role, and Jonnu Smith now is playing that slot role. And that was not what they did 2 years ago. That's not what they did 3 years ago. Like you said, Matt, we saw Waddle have success when they moved him around the formation, gave him some of those slot snaps, and used him in motion a ton. And we didn't see that last season. I think looking even at the preseason of what the Dolphins did is going back to a lot of motion, a lot of moving their pieces around, creating mismatches, and that means more Jaylen Waddle because he is the ultimate mismatch, I think, on this offense. So I'm with both of you. I think he's an absolute buy, and I think we see the Miami Dolphins offense go back to what worked instead of what didn't work last season.
If Jaylen Waddle gets hurt early this season, I'm going to be inconsolable. So please don't talk to me if that happens. We're going to move on, though, away from those bad feelings and to good feelings about Chris Godwin, who hasn't been on the football field in a little while, but that makes him more of a dynasty buy for me. I think generally you're going to look at an aging wide receiver or aging player at any position and think, oh, he's a sell, if anything. But that's what makes Chris Godwin a buy, is everybody else around you is going to want to get out of this injured guy who's getting close to 30 and, just be done with him in case his productive days are behind him. That's why Chris Godwin is sitting at wide receiver 47 in the keep trade cut rankings right now. And I know that some people are watching this or listening and saying keep trade cut sucks. Don't even trust those. That's the exact same spot that Chris Godwin's sitting in the Fantasy Pros expert consensus. So everybody who's submitted their rankings, consider Chris Godwin in the same range. Chris Godwin's wide receiver 35 in our PPR dynasty rankings. And you might look at that ranking and think, what do I want with a wide receiver 3 who's going to be turning 30 ahead of next season? That's just a guy to kind of, move on from at this stage in his career. Last season before Chris Godwin went down, he was wide receiver 3 in PPR points per game. The season before wasn't nearly as good, finished wide receiver 37 in points per game in 2023, but a lot of that was him just scoring 2 touchdowns, tied for 28th in expected PPR points per game. That's obviously a big profit even at that level versus a wide receiver 47 price tag. The year before, Chris Godwin was wide receiver 18 in PPR points per game in 2022. Like I said, he is 29 now, so not old yet, getting a little older, but not old yet, coming off that ankle injury that is delaying his start to the season. We'll see exactly when he gets onto the field, but the Bucs also extended him for 3 years at $22 million per year just ahead of this offseason, and he reportedly got offered even more than that by the Patriots. Now, we've seen what the Patriots have done with wide receivers, so maybe that's the most damning thing against Chris Godwin, but I'll still go ahead and chase the track record with him, and I think other people might come back with, yeah, but they just got Emeka Egbuka. And I would answer that with, yeah, but Mike Evans is 32 and in the final year of his contract. So even if Egbuka hits, we could hit next year, and it could be Chris Godwin and Emeka Egbuka as the top 2 wide receivers on this Tampa Bay offense. So I'm going to go ahead and buy Chris Godwin in wide receiver 4 range. I'm going to trust that he at least gets into that wide receiver 3 territory. He's at least not hurting my team, and that he still has the potential to help my team. What do you think, Jared? Is he too old for you?
No, I think he's kind of at a why not price at this point. Like, no one wants Chris Godwin in Dynasty right now. Listen, it was a nasty injury he suffered, probably worse than I realized or kind of projected early in the offseason. I think we were too high on Godwin early in the offseason. We expected him to be back out there for week 1. We know that's not going to be the case at this point. And honestly, it's probably going to be the back half of the season before he's someone we can rely on in our fantasy lineups. But as you said, Matt, he got that 3-year extension. That's the key to me for this Godwin buy, call, and Dynasty is that 3-year extension that the Bucs still believe this guy is going to help them beyond this season. And he should, right? Like you said, Matt, he's not even 30 yet. And these guys can, play into their early 30s for sure. So I think Godwin's someone that can, help you back half of this season, and then you'll still be a dynasty asset for at least 2026, maybe 2027.
I'd even push back on that timeline a little bit because they kept him off of the inactive list to open this season. So that indicates to me they're, hopeful he's back early. They're not going to rush him. Clearly, they're taking their time and making sure he's all the way back. But, we'll see. He might be helping our rosters by October. Shane, is he too old for you, Mr. Prospect Guru? Does he need to have like a college sticker on his helmet to interest you?
No, I think this is a great kind of game theory example of how to play Dynasty. If you have a contending team, you're going to make the playoffs. You're going to make the fantasy playoffs. Chris Godwin, I don't need him for the first couple weeks. I don't need him if he's a little bit rusty mid-season. He's a player that I can slot into my flex spot for the playoffs. And if you look on Keep Trade Cut, if that's what your league mates are using, players like Trey Benson, Jordan Mason, Tyrone Tracy are above him. I'll make those offers in a second if I have those players on a contender or even a team that's in a productive struggle. As you said, I think Chris Godwin's going to help you in 26, going to help you in 27. So he is definitely a player I've been targeting with some of those lower end running backs that aren't going to make my starting lineup when I hit the playoffs.
Those are our 3 buys. If you are trying to build a package and wondering if you're offering too much or not enough, the Dynasty Trade Calculator on DraftSharks.com is ready to help. We'll let you know whether it's a good deal, whether it's a good offer, or whether an offer that's coming from somebody else is worth your time. You just check that on DraftSharks.com before you accept or even negotiate any further. Obviously, just another step in your process that's going to help you make better trades and run your Dynasty team better. So those are our 3 buys for the show. Now it's time for 3 sells. Jared, who do you have to kick things off on this side?
Yeah, and I can see the pitchforks coming out for this one because I'm going to sell Jacory Croskey-Merritt, who's like, the darling of fantasy football right now. I think it's time if you were, sharp enough to draft him late in your rookie draft or, added him off the waiver wire shortly after the draft. I think it's time to cash in your chips on Jacory Croskey-Merritt, which kind of sucks because I like him. I thought he was like an underrated prospect, and I think that's come to fruition. He had that big season at New Mexico in 2023, nearly 1,200 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns on 6.3 yards per carry. He's 206 pounds with 4.45 speed, a 41.5-inch vertical, so he's definitely a plus athlete. But there are definitely concerns here, even beyond the fact that, he fell into the 7th round of the NFL draft. He spent his first 4 college seasons at Alabama State, never topped 122 carries in any of those 4 seasons. Even in that big 2023 season at New Mexico, 189 carries. So we don't really have like a workhorse season out of Croskey-Merritt across what was really, 6 college seasons, because he had the eligibility issue limited him to just 1 game at Arizona last year. He's already 24 years old. That's not great for Dynasty. My biggest concern, though, with Croskey-Merritt, he had 34 total catches across a little more than 5 college seasons. Even in that big 2023 season at New Mexico, 7 total catches that season. So it's tough to project him to do much in the passing game as a pro, and we know how important that is in fantasy. So I wonder how high the ceiling is here, and I just think there's a pretty good chance that like Croskey-Merritt's dynasty value is as high as it's going to get right now, just on all the preseason August hype that we just got done witnessing.
I've got a different take here, but Shane, I want to hear what you think about that sell call first.
I don't think I'm ready to sell. I certainly don't think he's a buy, but it's probably, I remember back when Kyron Williams, we were in a similar spot of like, I don't think he's going to make it. He was a late round pick. Now, I think Kyron Williams' profile was much better than Jacory Croskey-Merritt's, because we saw a little more of the bell cow at a blue blood program like Notre Dame. I mean, Jacory Croskey-Merritt in New Mexico was a great season. You could see the explosion, but I'm with Jared that I don't see the pass catching. But I want to get a week or 2 in on him to at least see, okay, is he the guy? Is he behind Chris Rodriguez? Or is he a player that could be a starter here and explode? And then that dynasty value goes up even more. So I think I'm going to sell him at some point, because I think the Commanders have to be that team in the market for a running back in next year's draft, maybe a Jeremiah Love even in the first round. So I want to sell Croskey-Merritt before that happens. But all we need is one big game. I mean, if he runs for 100 yards in week 3, I think you're going to be able to get double what you can get for him right now, and it's a lot right now.
Yeah, if I'm sitting on Jacory Croskey-Merritt and somebody comes trying to buy him from me, he's certainly available. I'm willing to take offers on him, but I wouldn't go shopping him right now, because if I have him, I likely spent almost nothing on him. I probably got him at the end of my rookie draft, maybe even on a post-rookie draft waivers run. So even if he becomes nothing, I'm not really losing anything. So the other side of that is maybe he is really good. Maybe the buzz is for real and he is about to take the lead of this backfield at some point. I agree that the redraft market has dramatically overvalued Jacory Croskey-Merritt in the wake of the Brian Robinson Jr. trade. I think there's way too much certainty that he's the guy now that Robinson's gone. But one thing that we do know is that JCM is the biggest change in that backfield since last season. So we went from last year where Robinson was the leader with Austin Eckler as, the clear number 2 and complement, to this year where JCM's really the only guy they added. I know there's some thought that we're getting a better version of Chris Rodriguez, and certainly maybe he emerges as a big time factor. But if I'm sitting on JCM and I don't have a big offer for him where somebody thinks that he's already like RB 15 level or something like that, I kind of want to wait and see what happens. And maybe, like Shane said, sell later. He could be a kind of guy like James Robinson in Jacksonville a few years ago, where even you wait out that rookie season, you're like, yeah, look what I got. Come get him, guys. And then you take the best offer there, because you know that all of those limitations Jared talked about are still going to be there, even if he does show out at some point in his rookie season.
Yeah, all fair points. I will say, I think it can be tricky, and sometimes, it can hurt you if you try to time the trade market too perfectly. I've had so many times in Dynasty where I'm like, I'm going to wait for this guy to have 1 or 2 more big games and sell him for even more. And, at that point, or the opposite way, I'm going to, wait for this guy's price to get even lower, then I'm going to buy him. I think, sometimes that can be tricky. Again, we're selling high on JCM here. I think you're selling him to the guy who thinks he's worth that 7th round pick and redraft. If there's one of those guys in your Dynasty league, that's what we're selling him to. And again, I go back to the lack of pass catching in his profile and the fact that he's a 7th round pick. Like, how many times do we see these 7th round running backs even have good seasons, but then because their team has nothing invested in them, they're willing to go out and add competition, and that guy eventually loses his jobs. I think Croskey-Merritt's profile is just really shaky. There's a lot of ways his dynasty value can kind of plummet from where it is right now.
Jared wants you to go ahead and sell the next Priest Holmes and Arian Foster just because he hates fun. It's sad to see, really.
Got me.
Shane, what you got for our next sell?
My sell is James Cook. finished as RB8 last year in PPR, RB9 in points per game. He's going as RB14 in Dynasty, so it feels like, it should be pretty good. But really, for James Cook, it's his age 26 season. We saw we got that second contract, that big contract, and the touchdowns is really what fueled that top finish. Right, in 2022, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. 2023, another 2 rushing touchdown season. Then last year, we saw 16 rushing touchdowns for James Cook, and within that, we saw his receiving production actually dip. In 2023, he had 112 PPR points just in receiving. To 2024, just 69 PPR points. In a PPR league, I want a running back who's going to be fueled a lot by those receptions, and James Cook was fueled by touchdowns, and that's just not sticky enough to me. If you look at where he's going ADP wise in Dynasty startups, it's around a lot of players that I like better. Travion Henderson, T. Higgins. I actually moved Cook in a league for Rashee Rice after the suspension was announced. Again, looking at a player, I don't need Rice for the first 6 weeks. I'm already going to make the playoffs. Let me go grab him. And I think even some players, if that's a little too high aiming, some receivers around James Cook's range on Keep Trade Cut that are below him, Devonta Smith, Jameson Williams, players that I'm very interested in. I just don't see James Cook in a second contract having that type of rushing touchdown production with Josh Allen there going to snipe some of those things away. I think the passing game for the Bills, we're going to see some more passing touchdowns come from a Dalton Kincaid or from a Keon Coleman. And that second contract running back, I am always willing to sell a little bit. And I'll add on top, I do like Ray Davis, the backup there, as a legitimate threat to take carries. Now that they have the second contract on Cook, you better keep him fresh because he's here for the long term. Let's use someone else to get some of those hard, grindy yards, maybe a touchdown or 2. So I really don't think James Cook is going to live up to that top 10 RB billing in the future. And I'd rather move him now than a year or 2 when he's 28, 27, maybe had a bad year and you've lost value.
James wet and whistles. He's highlighting categories that have a 69 in them, calling things not sticky enough. I don't know.
This is why you bring me on the show, Matt. This is why you bring me in.
I'm always negative on James Cook. I think that was part of why I didn't want to pick him for this show. I'm like, all right, it's time for me to stop talking negative about James Cook. The one thing I wonder about is now that Buffalo did pay him, I wonder if they're fixing the usage a little bit. I always hesitate to project a team increasing usage over the level at which the guy succeeded last year just because they paid him. But I was fully expecting them to let him walk in free agency after this season. So when he got that extension, I was like, oh, maybe something's going to change here. My only real change on James Cook is I want to make sure I'm not selling him for too little. Before that extension, I was basically, I want to get rid of James Cook this offseason. Now I'm like, all right, I would still like to sell him, but I just want to make sure that I don't give him away for too little. Jared, where are you at on selling James Cook for Dynasty?
Yeah, man, I think a lot of Dynasty players are going to have the thought that you just mentioned there that, the Bills paid Cook. They're going to turn him into a workhorse now. And it's possible. That's not what I'm expecting, though. I think they want him in this role he was in last year. I know the Athletics' Joe Biscaglia, I think one of the best, Bills beat writers, thinks the same. He thinks Cook's role is going to stay the same. And really, that's kind of what he projected as coming into the league anyways, right? He's not a big back. He's probably never going to be a workhorse. And what Cook was last year was a 50% snap rate player who, as Shane said, did not play as big of a role in the passing game as you might expect. So I just think, as we've talked about many times this offseason, his production looks very flimsy. If he scores half as many touchdowns as he did last year, he's going to end up looking like a pretty bad bet at this price.
For what it's worth, I think everybody in that Bills offense looks a lot better than they actually are because of Josh Allen. I'm going to close this out with another running back, and I'm actually going to throw a curveball at these guys because I'm going away from the player that I told them it was going to be. I said it was going to be
good.
Bucky Irving. Instead, it's another running back in the same range of rankings across formats. It is Chase Brown of the Bengals. Like I said, right next to Bucky Irving, inside the top 9 at running back across formats, whether you're talking about Dynasty or redraft. And I think redraft matters here because it shows how much people like the player and believe in the situation for this year. But when I look at Bucky Irving and Chase Brown against each other, Chase Brown is just the player that I believe in a lot less. So if I have both of them, or, if I'm talking to people that have one of them, Chase Brown is the one I'd be more interested in getting out on. Bucky Irving easily beat Chase Brown across the advanced metrics last year in rushing and receiving. Chase Brown is a 5th-round pick from 2023. He barely touched the ball as a rookie in a Joe Mixon-dominated backfield. We could explain that away. That's fine. Joe Mixon was obviously established and had a good, healthy season that year. Then Chase Brown opened his second season, trailing Zach Moss in work. Now, he eventually got past that and then took over the backfield when Zach Moss went down and put up big fantasy production, got loads of touches from the Bengals. So obviously we like that. But even that season also followed not only the Joe Mixon year, but Chase Brown being a late bloomer in college. He didn't lead a backfield in college until his age 20 season. He didn't dominate a backfield until his 5th and final season. And that was despite being a superior athlete, which we saw from his combine testing and playing in Illinois. So it's not like he was, Roshan Johnson stuck behind Bijan Robinson. He was Chase Brown at Illinois, just not taking over the backfield from anybody else. So now that we're coming off this second half that Chase Brown had last year, he's just being treated like this sure RB1 in fantasy. I think it's probably going to work out this season because he's in Cincinnati, because they're a strong offense, because he should continue to control the touches in that backfield. But I think if you're looking longer term, it's a good time to at least start looking at your trading options, because the biggest mark in favor of Chase Brown is his situation. And any time that that's the case for a running back, especially, you should really think about selling him. That's basically the archetype that we try to sell at this position. It's kind of what we're talking about with Jacory Croskey-Merritt. It's what I mentioned with James Robinson. Steve Slayton always pops into my mind from Houston. There are lots of these running backs that got drafted on day 3, maybe late day 2, had shockingly good rookie seasons, and then tailed off quickly after that. But it's difficult to look past that shocking season and, sell the guy when he's still at a prime age where you think that it should be so easy for him to repeat it. To me, Chase Brown is the guy that's in danger of, even if he works out this season, as soon as next year, finding more competition in the backfield and just becoming a guy that's okay at best, and then, trailing off Alfred Morris style through the rest of his career. So I would go ahead and try to trade Chase Brown away this year. And, again, not somebody that I would sell for whatever I can get right now. He should be in a good situation. He should get the ball. He should be effective. So you can draw this out over the season and wait for your best offer or wait for a big Chase Brown game and then try to do it. But I would start setting my mind to the idea of getting rid of Chase Brown this time.
I'm happy for you. I think you got this one right, selling Chase Brown instead of Bucky Irving. And I think it is just a good general reminder that, in Dynasty, we want to be buying talent, not situation. My eyeballs tell me Bucky Irving is better than Chase Brown. Like you said, Matt, all the advanced metrics last year, Bucky Irving was way better than Chase Brown. And I also agree with what you said, Matt, that I think Chase Brown is not a must sell, because I do think just the way the Bengals running back room is made up this year, that he is going to get a chance to be, a clear feature back in a high scoring offense. I do like his odds to be a top 10 running back this season. So I think he's a soft sell. If someone offers you a big trade, you can sell him. I think he's especially a sell for teams that aren't competing this year. So I think if you're not competing this year, then you're kind of not getting the best out of Chase Brown, which I do think is going to be 2025. I think 2026 and beyond, his dynasty value and it has just fantasy production has a good chance to decline from what it's going to be this year.
Yeah, to me, the big difference between Chase Brown and Bucky Irving, and not just those two players, because we want to try to broaden it out, but in general, when you're trying to evaluate these guys, you look at Bucky Irving, you say, yeah, maybe he doesn't get the work, but he's really good. You look at Chase Brown, you're like, who else is going to get the ball? That's the difference. You want to give a little bit more grace to the, but he's really good guy, and you want to try to talk yourself into selling the who else is going to get the ball guy. Shane, what do you think about Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, and I guess any other players that fit?
I think it's a good approach to have. If I'm a contending team, like you guys have said, I can't sell Chase Brown this year. Like I need him for the run, and I think he'll provide that for the run. And I think it is difficult if you're a rebuilding team to say, look, I have this 25-year-old running back that is producing. To ship him off is going to be difficult to do. And I think this is why we've talked about on the show too, is like building a dynasty team around receiver is just a better approach than running back, depending on your league settings. I think that's where, can I move Brown for a younger receiver, for an Emeka Egbuka, someone that I think will help me down the line too, and still has that breakout potential. I'd shop him, but yeah, I'm probably not moving him right now. I'm probably going to see how the season plays out a little bit.
Gotta love how Shane is multitudes. He opens the show in his flying car, buying picks 7 years down the road. He finishes it as a boomer, unable to get rid of the running back that scored for him last year.
Look, I can play any role you want in Dynasty. I got teams all over the map. I have a team with 9 2027 picks and a team with no picks in 2026. Whatever you want, whatever you need.
Don't try to pin the guy down into one category. He's going to beat you in another one. You can find up-to-date Dynasty rankings, Dynasty trade value charts, the Dynasty trade calculator, and much more at DraftSharks.com. You can get full analysis of your Dynasty league there, of your specific Dynasty league, by the way. You can use the Trade Navigator to find a trading partner. We talk about making trades and evaluating them, but finding a trade partner can be the hardest part at times. So we've got a tool that will help you find the team in your league that makes sense for you as a trading partner, and then it'll help you build that team-altering trade package before you even go to that other dense manager in your league and try to make things happen. Even the in-season team intel page becomes vital for Dynasty managers because you still have to set a lineup unless you're playing in a best ball league. You still have to set your lineup every week. We're going to help you with that. If you're playing Dynasty Fantasy Football, come let Draft Sharks be your unfair advantage.